Matty Tamua, all is right in Australian rugby once again. The Wallabies with a really impressive, gutsy late win over Argentina, 20 points to 19. They're back. They're not necessarily off the bottom of the TRC ladder, but that was an almighty step forward, wasn't it?
Sure was, one in a row, as far as I'm concerned. So we're up and running, and no, honestly, I honestly thought it was probably our best performance in maybe 2 years. I really did. I thought, and I wasn't expecting it. I thought it would be a bit of a tough game, but yeah, plenty to like there. I think the coaches very well did their job very well.
I'll let you know something, mate. It's not too hard to be the best performance in a couple of years when you go 2 from 9 in 2023 and miss out on the World Cup quarterfinals. But look, we are turning a new bright page, hopefully under Joe Schmidt. So that's a great step forward. The All Blacks, oh so close, just falling short to the Springboks. A lot of club rugby action over the weekend with finals across the country. And a really special podcast guest coming up. Your former coach, the former coach of the Wallabies, the former coach of Argentina, having led the Los Pumas to last year's World Cup semi-final, Michael Cheika. So a lot coming up here on the Raw Rugby Podcast. I don't know about you, Matt, but the idea of getting up early, maybe not on a Father's Day, but Sunday mornings, getting up, having a coffee, putting on the Wallabies, not a bad way to start a Sunday.
Not at all, particularly with the win. We just moved house on the weekend, so I stayed up, watched the All Blacks game, kept on working, probably had a couple hours sleep, and then watched the Wallabies straight after. So it was an action-packed Sunday for me, and well enjoyed.
Did you wake up because of a certain someone just having some teething issues, or was it just the fact that it's great?
As you know, it was both of ours, our first Father's Day ever. So yeah, it was good. There was a few teething issues, quite literally, but maybe she was excited to see the Wallabies win as well. So no, it was one to remember. That's for sure. Good old Sunday.
Well, with all the tennis happening at the moment, the US Open and the Paralympics, there's a fair bit of gold. There's a lot of Aussies that are competing really well at Flushing Meadows in New York City, but the Wallabies, their performance would have made a lot of people happy and smiling and getting up, probably proud to wear an old school jersey or one of the new Cadbury numbers. But to show the resilience and the character that they did to get across the line, you can't underestimate how important that is for a young side, right?
Yeah, massively. Away from home as well. Sometimes the away trips you can kind of, bond for want of a better word. You can kind of just not focus on the outside noise as much, friends texting you and wishing you good luck and all that kind of stuff. You can kind of just get stuck in, and look, maybe that's what happened. And as you say, it's been a feast of sport. We're actually running we've been running these Olympics and Paralympics little specials at the cafes that if you have the same first name as an Olympian who wins gold, you get a free coffee. And maybe we'll have to start doing it with the Wallabies soon because, if we can get used to these wins, happily hand out some free coffees. Good God. So, pretty stoked about that.
What impressed you? Was it the character at the end? Was it the front row standing up? Was it Carla Desano having his best performance in gold? Lenny Yikatau, wasn't he impressive? The Canberra local down there. There was a lot to be excited about and a lot of people that furthered their case and made it probably a fair bit easier heading to the selection table this week.
Yeah, definitely. The spine of the team was good. Your tight head, our scrum was good. I actually thought Fessler looked good there too. Tizano, Luke Khan. So you start talking about your tight head, a lock, a back rower, and then I actually thought Noah had one of his better controlled games in terms of his execution, kicking wise. So and then Lenny was very, very good as well. I think he's probably been a little bit quiet considering injuries and whatnot. But in my opinion, he's a world class player. And with the debutant on the inside of him, I think he shouldered a lot of that kind of load and was really, really good. So yeah, look, the big players stood up, and usually, these big away games, you need your top players to be outperforming their opposites, and I thought we did that.
It's an interesting one with Lenny Cattell because he stands up in the absence of Hunter Paisami, who generally is that really strong ball carrier. And Len's actually had opportunities over the last couple of tests. He's regularly beaten the first man. He's got over the gain line. Is this and obviously you played so much in the midfield. Is there something that when someone's missing, you step up, that you just shine more because you're expected to, you need to, or do you think that it was just a bit of it was fortunate at times to get himself in the right position? Defensively, Argentina didn't handle him, did they? He had 5 tackle busts in total, and 2 of those in the lead up to the try to rob Ballatini.
Yeah, I think people respond to responsibility quite differently, and not everyone is the same in that sense. Some might feel the weight of the world, and then some, will shoulder it and step up. And I think you're probably finding that with him. I think maybe with a guy like Hunter, who you could say they, are on kind of an even level pegging, particularly in terms of their career. They started similar time, all that kind of stuff. So now that you've got Hamish coming in, more is expected of Len, and I think you're seeing him step up, which is really, really cool. And you see that at the Brumbies as well. I think when he has more responsibility, he's quite a vocal person as well. He's a very intelligent person off the field, so I think he it seems like he's thriving with the increased responsibility.
I don't think it was a surprise that Noah Lolosio, despite the terrible weather conditions for the second straight test, I don't think it's a surprise that when you've got guys like Angus Bell, another test into his comeback, Taniela Tupou back after a 2-match absence, Lukan Salakaia-Loto probably carrying the best he has, despite that first early drop. He really managed to dent the line, which he hadn't in a while. So I don't think it's a huge surprise that Lolosio managed to find his way into the game. I'm curious around 2 things. One, 27 phases. Right at the top almost, second, third minute, the Wallabies get their hands on the ball for a long, long time, but they do really nothing with it. Managed to play either side of the ruck, and that's very much a Joe Schmidt sort of feature. But a column today in the Times out of London with Stuart Barnes, former fly half, played 10 tests, very well known in the rugby circles, critical, damning really of the Wallabies attack, and Joe Schmidt saying that he's going to have to do much more than what happened towards the back end of his tenure with Ireland. And he's centred on the 27 phases where, in one respect, it shows great ball handling, continuity, managing to recycle the attacking breakdown. But is he right to highlight a few concerns, or is it just because it's so early in his tenure, it's going, hang on a moment, wet conditions? I think that's you've gone a little bit early there, Barnesy.
He's definitely gone early, mate. It's always ironic when you have an Englishman talking about variety and attack, considering the way they play and the way they're known to play. Look, the game you can't section a game of rugby and cherry pick one part, 27 phases that didn't do anything. It's like if you look at it in context, the start of the game, teams are fresh. Defensively they're getting up off the ground quicker. You're wearing them down. It's a game of attrition. Later in the game when Lenny gets through and offloads and Bob Valentini scores a try, it's all been in context. It's all added because of what's been the platform that's been set earlier on. So there's a column to be written there, I'm sure, and he's going to be writing that. But like I said, mate, the English aren't exactly known for their ingenuity and attack, and so I think it's pretty rich for a guy like him to be saying that. Someone who I do respect very much so, but no, he's off the mark.
What about when you have? We know the Argentinians have that brick wall of defence. They've had it for a while, haven't they? And we've seen it, I would say, the last 5-6 years. And when you've got the likes of Marcus Cremo, particularly when he plays in the back row, great back row trio. They don't necessarily, their hookers go hard at the ball, but I don't think that they go especially early on, they don't go that hard. They tend to fan out, have a bit of a brick wall. What are some other solutions around? Is it just early on that wearing them down is not a bad thing, or is there other ways that you start to break it down? Is it little kicks in behind, or do you think that the fact that Wallabies had kicked so much recently, they decided, no, we're gonna not do that for the time being and go a different direction?
Yeah, I think other than the fact that we missed Hunter, we had some big inclusions with Angus Bell and Taniela, and like you said, Lucan was very, very good, I thought, as well. You got Harry Wilson. We had some genuine ball runners. And I think once you've got that, you can probably start tempering the kicking options a little bit more, albeit it was wet and we had to be a bit smart there as well. But yeah, it's an interesting one. The Argentinians are a difficult team to break down. It's usually the loose, stuff is where you'll get them. They've focused heavily in the last maybe 3-4 years on that second man tackle. So exactly as you just said there, rather than maybe that on ball presence, once the ball's on the deck, they get that second man in and slow it up that way. Very rugby league wise, very rugby league, and they had Kidwell. I think Czech knows them very well. They had Kidwell in there, who was big on that kind of second man tackle to kind of slow the ball up that way. So look, there's different ways of doing that. I think we benefited massively. Like if we want to do this type of game where we're retaining possession, we need good ball carriers. And we must have good ball carriers. And, maybe that's why you're seeing guys like Taniela start ahead of in Allen, because it's probably part of his game that he has over Allen.
Well, I think Allen made a good impact off the bench, and the fact that he managed to generate quick ball really allowed Lenny Katau to take advantage of a couple of soft defensive efforts on the fringes. What about the wingers? I thought Tom Wright was safe. I thought he did his best on a really greasy, slippery night. He saved the Wallabies a couple of times, and he managed to have a safe pair of hands picking the ball up. But Marika came off his wing brilliantly to support Lenny Ikitau, but Andrew Kellaway, we didn't see a hell of a lot of him. Is that just a situation of wet weather, really difficult to get it out wide, and new combinations in the midfield as well? All of that means that someone occasionally can go a little bit MIA.
Yeah, and Marika doesn't. Every time I played with Marika, he had a license to kind of do whatever he wants because it works. And that unfortunately, maybe the flip side of that is that you probably need someone else holding the paint. So you have that width in your game, and unfortunately on a wet night, a guy like Andrew Kellaway might not get as many opportunities. But look, it's not everyone's going to be. Some games someone's going to be in all like 10 out of 10. Other games it's going to be less, and I think, whilst we want to evaluate each player individually, we have to see it in context. It's a team sport. Everyone plays their role, and Kellaway was good. He provides a lot of communication. He provides a lot of leadership, a lot of defensive nous as well. So, his role on the team shouldn't be understated by any means. And I was interested. The part of the attack that I was actually quite interested in, and saw it in the All Blacks game as well, is the multiple halfbacks. Like, people are really, rather than focusing on shape now, it's about speed of ball. So you're seeing, little quick picks. You're seeing teams really try and capitalize from any momentum or any dominant carries. And it seems to be quite an interesting way the game's evolving. That South African All Blacks game, you compare that to a Six Nations game, that was completely different. Nothing like it.
Well, it helps when you play on a dry track, doesn't it, in Joburg, where you generally do see some big score lines racked up because of the conditions there. But I find it fascinating with the All Blacks, and we'll probably touch upon this a little bit later on, but they've gone really heavy with fetches at the breakdown, guys that ensure that they get really quick breakdown ball. Is that what you're also seeing as well with the All Blacks? Scott Robertson, obviously a former back rower. Can you see across the world, and that being one of the trends right now, is if you get quick ball, you win games?
Yeah, it ebbs and flows a little bit. I always wonder though, with say like a Sam Cane, a Fetcher, does that necessarily mean your ball's quicker when you're in attack? The fact that he provides an on-ball presence in defense, I'm not sure the impact that has. You probably look more at like your locks who generate that quick ball, or ball carriers who actually dominate the contact, so the clean's quite easy. But yeah, I think the game is definitely it got very shape focused for a while. Everyone was playing that 3-man pod shape with the 10 out the back, and to an extent they still are. But I think teams are really trying to capitalize on speed of ball a bit more now, which is exciting because it's not as predictable. Condition dependent, I agree. But yeah, it's kind of cool seeing the game start to evolve a little bit. Happened a little while ago when referees were favouring the attacking team and not giving much, on-ball presence or on-ball penalties for holding on. And then that you go on another cycle again as well. So it's always interesting seeing the way the game evolves.
Yeah, who can catch the cycle? Just I think putting a bit of a bow on the Wallabies' performance. I agree, Matt. Feels like outstanding. He hit his targets, didn't he? And to be able to get the Wallabies clean ball on a wet night, you can't understate how important that is. And guys like Ballatini, just such granite with how they play with, so hard. Tizano's breakdown work with 3 turnovers. It was a great team performance right across the board, and that's what made it really like a special evening for the Wallabies, breaking their 8-match losing streak in the Rugby Championship, their 4th win of the year as well. Do you anticipate a couple of changes, a little bit of tweaking, or I think Joe Schmidt, clearly no Isaac Kalia. He's gone back home. Zane Nongol getting on the plane, but I imagine James Slipper comes on. He will probably equal the record of George Gregan for 139 tests. But other than that, I can't see many changes.
No, I don't think we need to, other than anything injury forced, a week off afterwards. It's not necessarily a load management thing here. We should be building our confidence, our ability to learn. Like, it was a good win. It was a really, really good win. But this week's another challenge. The fact that you're going to get a response from a team who, will be disappointed that they lost at home. So it'll be a steep ask in that sense. And I think it'll be some really, really good lessons in terms of how to back up performances, how to respond when you're away from home, when everyone's patting you on the back for breaking that hoodoo. How do you then respond and play a team who have a bit more to play for now? So I think I would be picking the same team. However, who knows? But we've got some really good coaches at the helm there. So we'll see what they're thinking.
Tell us a story about James Slipper. He'll probably equal it. I'm sure it will be this weekend. What a servant. I don't think he would have thought that he would have still been playing at this point in time, particularly not for the Wallabies, given what occurred 2017, 2018 for the Wallabies, or for his life in general, rather. But what a character, and 35 now. He's just one of the good guys of Aussie rugby.
Yeah, he's a great man. He really is. And I think you're right. I think if you asked him, he probably wouldn't have said that as well. That he'd be the most capped Wallaby at one point in his career. He's a lovely, lovely guy. We always call him lots of names. Probably shouldn't be able to share them here, but he loves a cuddle. We love giving Slips a big old cuddle because he's a big friendly bear. He often requires a cuddle. He has these emotional ups and downs where you would think he hates rugby. He's always complaining about how sore his back is, his knees are, whatever. But as soon as that whistle goes, or he's the most competitive guy. He has some super high standards. But then once that's over, if he can sit, he'll sit. If he can lie down, he can lie down. He won't be expending any energy unnecessarily. He's kind of your classic prop in that sense. But what a remarkable kind of achievement it could be.
Well, here's another man that you've spent a fair bit of time with, a person that you've also gone to 2 World Cups with, and that's your former coach, Michael Cheika. Well, welcome to a man with plenty of skin in the game, a fella that knows players both in Australia and South America very well indeed. Michael Cheika, the former Wallabies and the former Argentinian head coach. Michael Cheika, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, boys. Superstars, I see. Podcast.
Oh, mate, we're so famous at the moment. It's really, really hard.
Any chance of your own show on network? Like, is there anything going on? Any chance?
Mate, network's dying. It's all about podcasts these days.
Okay.
I'm watching Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman. I'm thinking of doing an ice bath after this, actually. So,
few people would have thought that yes, indeed, that 5 years since you took Matt Tamua to the 2019 World Cup, that Matt would be doing a podcast with Czech, being the new Leicester head coach. Off the back of Matt playing at Leicester, the Tigers at Welford Road a few years before that. So it's amazing what goes on. Boys, you don't really need any introductions, but tell me, Czech, what's it like when you've been the head coach of both the Wallabies and Argentina, and the two nations meet for the first time since you were coaching them last year?
Yeah, that whole thing's actually relatively complicated, I suppose, emotionally. You know, I think I've almost got a bit of like, I'm almost dreading coming in contact with Leinster, you know, at some stage in Europe with Leicester. So you can imagine, you know, because I think you put so much into a club or a team, of so much of your emotions, you almost don't. I personally haven't really wanted to coach a team that will go against them, you know, and I think, but when you're in the international, you don't sort of have much choice. You're going to run into each other, especially if you're in the same championship. And that whole, I suppose the Argentinian thing came up quietly on me because, you know, it came from a bit of time in league and then helping out Mario, and then it just sort of happened by consequence. So you do have a clash of emotions, and it's tough. I think it's best symbolized by my young fellas who, you know, sent me a picture across of them ready to watch the game. They all had different jerseys on. You know, one had an Aussie on, one had an RG on. The dog had a jersey, one of the national team's jerseys on. They all had different jerseys on at the time. And it was interesting because when I did, you know, coach Argentina, I said to the kids, like, when we played Australia, you can go for Australia. I understand that's your country, you know, but it's I won't reveal all their individual decisions, but it's a tricky time. Not tricky in a bad way, just it's a tough time to divide emotions. Obviously, I've made a lot of good friends over there, real lot of good friends, and Australia's my country too. So I almost figure I'm a little bit of both.
Speaking of good friends, I actually remember Czech, when Mario was coaching with you at the Wallabies, he asked if he was able to sing the Argentinian national anthem. How did you go when playing against the Wallabies? Were you humming it? Were you singing the anthem?
No, I think that respect, like, I think it's got to be a personal decision at that point, you know, for how you feel on the day. I didn't. I think it's I personally think it was that's the respectful point of view. You know what I mean? That's my allegiances with that other country, you know, with Argentina for that time, and I have to be fully into it. And in fact, at the World Cup in 2023, just beforehand, when we had a bit of an event together, and I asked before the first game, I asked the team if it was okay with them if I sang theirs in the lead up to the games, because that was the only time I did it, because I felt it was like a last step towards, you know, getting us fully not bonded together, but, you know, it was just, I thought it was, you have to be all in those tournaments if you want to go as far as you can go, especially in it's so competitive. And I just felt like maybe symbolically that was just last way of going, I'm all in with you guys. Let's go and get into it and get as far as we can.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw any tears though from you, Czech, when you were singing it.
Concentrating too much on getting the words right, mate. I had no room for the tears. I had to practice and get ready. So that whole year, those couple of years, I had to learn a few new anthems. So I went with Lebanon in the Rugby League World Cup. You know, I wanted to be able to sing the anthem there, as well as and then with Argentina. So it's, yeah, these last few years, I suppose, for me, being involved in those different teams, it's opened up a lot of different areas for me culturally as well. Like even just learning to speak, you know, a version of Spanish, I suppose, or as well as, you know, opening up to those different ideas or different emotions coming in. It's been really good for me.
Czech, I'm really interested to know, actually, you know, for quite a while, and I say we because I was fortunate enough to play under you for so long, but we struggled in New Zealand, you know, to beat the All Blacks in New Zealand. And and even at Twickenham, bar the World Cup. With Argentina, you had some success in New Zealand in these kind of big kind of games. Is there a mental block that we have in Australia? Was there a progression in your coaching? Was it circumstance? Like what's different that we couldn't achieve in that sense?
I think a bit of all those things, man. I don't think we always look for the magic wand, like, what's the one thing that's going to change this, or it's going to win a game for someone or lose a game. I think it's a combination of lots of different things. I think, there's a different rivalry between Australia and New Zealand than there is between Australia and Argentina. Between New Zealand and Argentina, excuse me, there's different connection points across that. I would say a combination of all of those things. I think the Argentinian team that I coached, they were really quite open-minded to some new ideas that I had from them. So they, about the way they approach games mentally, I think they really wanted to look into that. So I felt like they were ready to take that step and to go out there and play a certain way, which then gave them a certain amount of confidence. Or to be able to, also, we changed a little bit from game to game on what we wanted to do. So I think that just gave them that little bit of confidence. And I don't know, the dynamic occurred in those weeks. Who knows? You can never put your finger on it totally, and those that claim they can aren't telling the truth. It's a combination of incremental work that just happens on the day.
You talk about tactical changes, things like that. How does your coaching change when you go to a new team? I remember reading Eddie Jones's book for a while ago, and he spoke about how it's not a one size fits all. You go from one team and you apply the same template and it works there. Like one thing that stuck out hugely to me, and I actually sent you a text, but I think this to an old number, was the Argentinian Wallabies game over in Argentina, and you guys dusted us up. But the thing that stood out to me was the use of your kicking game, and in particular the short kicking game, and probably something that we didn't use at a Wallabies level. What part of that are you adjusting your coaching style to what you have, and then what part of that are you actually growing as a coach as well? Is there a combination of all of it, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I suppose that's almost the transformation as well, or evolution, I wouldn't say. If I go back to even my Leinster days, I'm pretty fresh into coaching, and discovering on the run. And even when I decided to leave Leinster, like at the end of 2010, we had a great time, we won some trophies, and I had the opportunity to stay there, obviously, but I felt like they needed to evolve in a certain way, a different way, a different type of personality maybe, and some a different set of skills. And I had to make a decision of whether I wanted to change myself to go in that direction, or whether it was time to let someone else do that there. And in fact was Joe, right? He came after me there. So I made the decision that I wanted to stay in my own, I suppose, concept of footy at that time. And that's why I decided to step out, because I really did feel like they needed that next step of evolution. And I then had to change as well with that. I probably wasn't ready to do that then. And I think that held me in really good stead for a certain point. But, mate, you got to be learning all the time from wins, losses, good times, bad times, all that type of stuff. And I feel like that's something I've got much better at, is adapting more, not compromising the type of rugby that I want to play or footy that I want to play, but with the team, but adapting to the strengths and the possible opportunities that I feel like are presenting themselves either inside of our team or inside of the game. Like there's different opportunities now. What we would have done tactically maybe in 19 is changed again now, or before, in that period when I was with Australia, has changed because things have changed. Defenses have changed. Rules have changed. There's different things occurring which are changing the way the game looks, and therefore you've got to try to keep the same principles around being attack-minded, etc., but also evolve that around making the best opportunities so you can go out and win big games.
In terms of winning big games, like you spoke about Joe succeeding you at Leinster, how would you be going about it purely as a coach perspective with the international laws? I know you kind of brought the ghetto law in a way, and with the world becoming a lot smaller in terms of players going overseas, how would you be approaching it as a coach? Do you think that there's a need to just select the best team possible from an Australian point of view? This is, or do you think that the local game suffers in such a sense that we can't be doing that?
Yeah, I think that process, Matt, is a combination of what you can't just make it in isolation of what your plans are for the game as a whole. So you could make that decision to pick. I believe at least, like, you could make that decision if you wanted to pick everyone from overseas if you were upgrading the level of the game here so that the game kept its interest here as well. So if you look at South Africa, how they do it, they've got a strong, provincial setup. They've got Currie Cup set up. The provincial setup plays in Europe, but they're home-based. So they're still getting home games. People are still watching the game. But yet they still then can pick their players in Japan, etc. Because the game, I feel like it's absolutely imperative not to give up on the game at home. Like that's where the growth of the game should be, and then from there you can make your decisions around picking players from everywhere. As it is right now, until they sort out what they want to do eventually with the domestic game, it's hard to make that decision, mate, because you go, if I do bring all those if I do let players go overseas and then pick them all for Australia, the game at home will struggle a lot because there's no strategy around. Well, I don't know. Sorry, that's not fair. I'm not sure if there's a strategy around where the domestic game or what the future looks like for rugby in Australia. So I think the two have to be connected in.
I'll tell you what, I could just let you guys talk and just have Matt take over because you're doing a sterling job. But just continuing on that point just for a bit, you moved heaven on earth to get some players back. And right now, Matt Tamua, I think there was helicopters involved and all sorts of things to get him back from Leicester at times. And then, of course, Drew and Matt to begin with, Matt Giddo this is. Guys like Will Skelton at the moment in La Rochelle, there's several outstanding second rowers in France at the moment. There's guys like Sean McMahon in Japan, Harry Hawkins. Do you think that is winning for the Wallabies, is that enough to turn Australian rugby around a little bit, or do you still think that super is important?
No, I think that super, I think that I won't say super, I'll say the domestic game is really important because even if you look at, we've had issues, obviously I'm not going to say that it's going in the wrong direction, but we've had issues in growing the game at home. And even after we made the final of the 2015 World Cup, I'd consider that as quite a successful operation. We didn't really, that didn't really change anything in the way that the game was in Australia itself. And I think that I do believe that, like I said, if they've got that part in Australia sorted out, they can do that. I think winning the Wallabies, obviously, yes, that is great, obviously, for them to win games and to have the highest level of player there. And the coach I'm sure will make that decision. But it won't, I think it's shown that it won't solve any of the issues that go around the domestic game or the quality of the domestic games or the Super Rugby or whatever. And it's when I say the quality, I mean the engagement of the fans and people with it.
Do you think we've struggled since the South Africans have left the Super Rugby?
Yeah, obviously it makes it more difficult. I'd be probably a little bit out there, mate. In the way I think about it, I would think that the best thing for us to do, and it would be difficult earlier on, best thing for Australia to do, even though it would be very difficult early on, it needs protections to go it alone. Have our own domestic competition. Let some of the players, like I said, there are already a lot of players playing overseas, and sort of try to rebuild our domestic game from scratch. And I know that a lot of people say, well, the quality won't be high enough, or whether it'll be watered down with more teams, etc. But with a good strategy, I think that you need to have a good partner with you that'll get you through it the early years. But many other sports have done that. It's about being able to negotiate that idea. I think we're in a bit of a stall at the moment around that whole thing. We're not. Yeah, we're still playing good teams, like we're playing against these good New Zealand teams regularly. But we then have to decide if that's players through the amount of players that are playing at the youth level, as in just that next level behind. I won't say kids, still lots of kids playing, but that next level behind. Who's coming into Super Rugby? What's our academies look like, as far as what's the next level look like coming in? How well are they getting coached? All those types of things. I know that there's a lot on there, right? So it's not like it's something you can just have.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I probably even look at it as a sense of having an Australian premiership team every year, like the mental impact that has. Then once you play internationally, that you've learned how to win. It's all well and good. Yeah, it might not be as high a level, and you've probably taught me this, to be fair, that kind of mental block and the lack of it, knowing how to win games, having an Australian champion every single year, that it's hard not to get behind that, and I do think that would actually transfer into international rugby, because ultimately you believe you can win games.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the way. I actually would have been, like, without giving away things that happen in meetings, I think in 18 we talked about that at that sort of level of the executive level in Australian rugby, and so it was clear South Africa were going to be going. I think people didn't like that word was coming out of the Northern Hemisphere from way back then. I would have been proposing that back then, even when I was Australian coach, because I think that we have a tradition in Australia of getting behind a national competition. Like, look at AFL, look at rugby league. A-League is still, they've been able to build that national competition around a game that we would have thought we had rugby was a game that could have structured a national competition better than football, but football's been able to do it. And I just think that that's what Aussies like to watch, that type of rivalry and that connection. And then, then you've got to do that. It's all good in theory. To do that, you've got to go out and you've got to negotiate. You've got to get some good partners on board, like Kerry Packer did with cricket, like, other people have done with, you've got to, even the government at a certain point, because it's a big game for the nation, like, to get them involved in reconverting the sport back. So it's got a really good foundation from the fundamentals of the game. And I know it sounds quite risky or out there, but I think that's very much it. And I think if we then focus on coaching at all those guys of those teams and really put some emphasis there, the quality of the people that are in those positions, so they can bring players through, I think things rebuild. It takes time, yes, but we've got the time, because the game's always going to be played, right? It's not like we're in a hurry.
Check, I remember you talking about that idea when you invited a handful of us over to your place in Coogee or Randwick or wherever it was. But so it's not just a story that's come out of the thin air in the last year or two. And it's interesting leaving the Super Rugby AU comp in 2020 and then 21. It was 42,000 for the Reds and Brumbies that evening. And before that even, the Wallabies that you were part of, Matt, nearly beat New Zealand's across the ditch in Wellington with a missed penalty away from Reece Hodge sealing the deal over there. So it's an interesting one from a high performance perspective as well. How do you feel, Check, when guys are leaving the code, like the Carter Gordons, the Mark Nwanganita-Arsies, because you coached against them last year? You wouldn't have had your hands on them necessarily back in the day, but it's when we're talking about all these things, they're going to codes where there's an Australian winner every day of the week and every weekend, and unfortunately, they're leaving coming into the prime of the year. They're not even in the prime of their careers yet.
Yeah, like I'd say that'd be extremely disappointing outcomes. There's a lot of things involved there. I think you shouldn't consider the different codes any different to the same code but going to play overseas. It's all another agent that's, tapping into to the Australian resources as far as players are concerned, and it's happening at all levels. The MLR is looking at players that are playing club rugby, not just in Super Rugby, and that's, Japan's tapping in on players. I think they should all be considered the same. It's just the profile that those players get, because it's common that the union players are going over to league. It's more the league players that we've looked always traditionally of coming over to union. But I think that all of us grow up in Australia watching both games, playing both games. So there's a background there, and then some coaches will pick a player that they think has got the ability to make a transfer over. And, I don't doubt that there's a whole lot more players. If these ones are successful, that there'll be a whole lot more players that they will look at, because they'll start to believe the league coaches that, okay, there's a bit of a resource here. I don't know if they've got also incentives inside of their salary cap if they bring players over from another code, or not 100% sure there. But I think it's definitely something that rugby needs to keep on its radar, because if, let's say, Carter Gordon goes well there, and I think he will. He's got a good coach up there that'll look out for him and prep him right. And Mark as well. If they do well, I think the radar will be on a few others for sure.
Well, it was fascinating seeing Angus Crichton, another former rugby kid, at the Shoot Shield final yesterday. That was at Leichhardt Oval, and he's obviously snapping a 55-year drought, but he's another guy that almost came to rugby this year. But it would have been just fascinating to see him play the 15-man game.
Well, I think the thing there, mate, is that if you look at the amount of players that have gone through like that top end of maybe the traditional nursery of Australian rugby before, which has been that private school network, which they've had, that's only because they've had a good competition going right at the schools level. That's been relatively not taken over by league, but league have sort of got involved in that area. I know that for a fact. So many players that have gone to those schools that we probably in rugby haven't been able to convert to come and play rugby over the last 5 or so years. If you even had 5 of those that stayed in rugby and were playing in the national team, that means there's 5 starters from the national team that are on the bench, and there's 5 players that are on the bench that aren't playing that give you that depth.
See, that's one of those ones, Check, where I think, kids who are leaving school, going to league, it's primarily financial would be my, and unless we get a partnership or an investment into the game, one of the, consequences, benefits of letting guys go overseas, particularly the higher paid players, that we can actually recruit the younger ones. Is there some unintended consequences in that? Is that trickle down economics probably not the way to think about it? Like, is there a way that we can, if we're allowing our Will Skeltons and Marikas to go overseas, we're saving $500,000 that we can actually spend on the younger fellas? Or is that naive?
I think you have to pick and choose. I still think that players who are going to be your icon players and that are going to then be looked up to as the players that young kids want to be, because you can't really devalue that philosophy. Because if you hear many players that come into I watched some of the league yesterday when Sean Johnson retired, for example, and if you heard so many of his colleagues or his teammates that said, "Oh, I watched this guy when I was growing up. I wanted to be like him," So that effect genuinely happens. I've got 3 boys that are playing rugby and league, and they have that exact effect, right? They know who players they want to be like. So I think that you've got to have a balance. There's some players, yes, that you can let go and let them earn their money there and still be able to call back on them. And when you get the balance, but then keep it different, it's almost like a formula you keep. I want this amount of top international players who are currently there, a few of these ex-internationals, some of these fringe internationals who are coming through, then a core guys who are never internationals, that we can still build up and make as great club players. And then you've got that mix. You can let some go here and there, and then call on them for test footy for sure.
But I like, so on that though, so Sean Johnson would be inspiring players, obviously when he's playing for the Warriors. Are we inspiring lots of people at a Super Rugby level, or are people looking at the Wallabies game and going, "Oh, I want to be like him"? Like I probably start thinking like, yeah, I'd love it if Super Rugby was inspiring the next generation, and in an ideal world that would be the case. But are we missing out on not having these guys playing in the pinnacle of our sport when, say, the mass? Well, not the mass, but the kind of public are actually watching Wallabies games, and these guys aren't playing.
Yeah, but I think, Matt, that is definitely the case as it is now. But I think that we have to change that. That I remember, I remember bringing in when we were when you would have been there, maybe when Joe Sawali came in as a young fella, came to the Wallabies camp, right, and just to have a look around. And I think he might have been 15 or 16, whatever. And I don't think he knew many of the guys, except for Israel and maybe one of the other guys who have been playing league, because they've got access to watch that game. There's a lot of free-to-air coverage of that game, so more people can see who those guys are. And that partnership where, like, how Nine have almost made league, in their partnership with them and built the game together. That's the type of strategical thinking that you need to have about how you can take the game to the next level on their own. As it is right now, mate, you're right. That can't happen, right? Because people won't see those guys anyway. I see kids like Josh Fluke and that coming through. Would they be playing? They're playing for Australia. They've come from, young kids playing grade footy all the way through. Not many people will know who those kids are, even though they're playing for Australia, right? So, so I think that there's that part of the game and how we market the rugby players, right, and how we turn them into something that people can actually then go and appreciate the skills they have and each individual player and want to be those guys. I do think it's out. I think it's definitely in kids. It's about how we then present that to the kids, how we present it. And it's all very longer term thinking. I get it. And everyone wants immediate results. But like I said, we've got the time because the game will be continued to be played. How we then deal with short-term goals, we could deal with that strategy a little bit in a different way. I don't know. But I feel like a long-term plan is absolutely essential because or strategy of where it's going, because we're going to be playing the game in that time. The game's not going away.
Well, check if things don't go well at Welford Road. I'm pretty sure that there could be a role as Rugby Australia chairman or chief executive.
I'll bring you right there, mate, because things are going to go well at Welford Road. There's no opportunity.
You have no idea about Check, do you, Christy?
No, I do. I was just looking. I'm just looking forward to Michael Cheika being the next Rugby Australia.
I'll never forget when I think it was 2015. There were guys talking about leave after the World Cup, and Check absolutely lost it, saying, "Why the hell are you thinking about October 1 or November 1? Because it's all in now. It's all and there is absolutely no chance that it's not going to go well because it's you can't be one foot in, 1 foot out."
And that's the philosophy. You got to focus on the now, And I know you got to plan on the future and all that stuff in the background or whatever, but you've got to focus on the now. When all this happened with Leicester, because I've spoken to them a few different times over the years, and I've had a pretty long association as an enemy. Probably, we had played them in European Cups many times with Leinster. We won European Cup against them in 2009. I brought back a few players from Leicester that sort of helped transition Leinster into the team that they became. But in all my time, I've never, ever signed another deal when I was in a deal already, because I feel like it's almost like cheating. You've got to give everything to what you got, and then hopefully you'll do a great job and something will come from that, So that's the way I've always felt. And I think that mentality is really good for players as well. Just think about what's going on now. The rest will look after itself.
Well, it's fascinating seeing you land at Leicester. I just want to ask, were you ever approached by the Tars or sounded out by the Wallabies? Because there has been some big vacant roles in recent months and indeed over the last year. And Joe Schmidt's there now, and I'm sure that it's a lot of people that are confident off the back of today's success over Argentina. But were you ever sounded out?
No.
Does that surprise you? Like, and Matt, does it surprise you as well, knowing Cheik's intellect, knowing how much he's given to the game, knowing that he just led Argentina to a World Cup semi-final? Is it surprising?
I'm not surprised that I wasn't sounded out either, to be honest, mate.
Yeah.
No, look, I think that's, you have a direction you want to go, and people, certainly wouldn't be, I don't think it's a problem for me. If people make a decision on what direction they want to go around things, and obviously that direction was one where they didn't think that I would be, I was someone that they could look at to help them improve the game. The thing about coaches is you got to pick I think it's very three-dimensional. You got to pick the right person for the right team at the right time, and then obviously that responsibility comes back to the decision makers. So it's pretty clear. Even say it was interesting in the end how the Waratahs made the decision on the person whose position I took here at Leicester. You know what I mean? That happened pretty rapidly, I'd say, after he left here. So they obviously had in mind a type of person they wanted, right, for the role, and then they're just waiting to see where that person would come from.
Two quick ones. I want to hear a little bit. Augustin Creevy, last test match for the Pumas. Julian Montoya, your captain at the Pumas as well. Two fine hookers worldwide. Give us your best stories about Augustin.
Well, mate, I only met Gus later in life, really, because when I was in with Mario helping out, he wasn't in the team then, right? So when I started, I brought him back in, but I think he's probably undergone a great transition in his career around who he is as well, and how he'd be. I'd imagine it's pretty hard to adapt from being the captain of the country, and then you miss out, and then you come back in that secondary role. And I think that's one of the great things he did. Obviously, will always be talked about the great games he played as captain of Argentina. But I think it's more like, from my point of view, how he's approached these last few years. He's a great supporter to the team as far as, the way he backed into it, knowing that the captain was the person who plays in his position, and I think he was then able to exceed to 100 tests, played in his first opportunity to beat New Zealand as a Argentina player, which he didn't get an opportunity to do. Had a World Cup, like a good World Cup with the team, and then also passed 100 tests. I think he's now the most capped player, and then got to, I'm pretty sure the Plata is his home base, so he then gets to retire on his home ground. He probably would have loved to have a win on the last day as well, but it wasn't to be. That's the game, doesn't write a script all the time. So fantastic player, and he's obviously going to have a great career in whatever he does going forward. And as to Montoya, there's something about that number 2 jersey in Argentina that just keeps turning them over, like Mario, unbelievably fantastic player. Could have played on the wing, probably did for most of his career. He thought he was going to be the number 2 on his back, but great player. And then you've got Creevy and now Montoya, they all have to sit in the wings and learn their craft, which makes them, when they get there to the position, they never want to give it up. Like Montoya, you got to have some security guards after the game if you take him off before the 80 minutes is over, because he'll come after you. He wants to play his footy as much and compete as much as possible. I love coaching those guys. They give you so much energy as a coach because of their attitude about how they want to play the game. So I'm going to have the opportunity to coach him now at Leicester as well. So I'm looking forward to getting back. We'll have a bit of fun.
I'll bet you are. The last one I want to ask you is a person that you made mention of beforehand, Joey Suwali. He's a person that hasn't played a game of professional rugby, but as you said, you brought him into a national camp. Was it a good signing? Was it a good decision to chase Joey Suaalii on a fair bit of money? And secondly, do you think he will succeed? And thirdly, where would you play him?
Okay. So firstly, definitely a good decision, right? Yes, a lot of money. Now, the finances, I don't understand. As long as it's proportionate to I think if it's proportionate to the finances of others, then yes, it's great because he's gonna go real well. He's a competitor, and he's gonna really well. I feel like it's always high pressure when you recruit those guys, and obviously Joe, that's his forte, is the attacking side of the game. So there is a certain amount of reintegration you've got to use when you're bringing someone from league back to rugby, even if they've played rugby before. I've had to do it a few times, both with Israel, with Marika, with a couple of other players that we brought over from league in different versions of at Waratahs or in at the Wallabies. What was the other question? What position? I think fullbacks is go, like the more room to move, great under the high ball. You can orchestrate him coming to catch high ball and attacking plays as well. And his room to move, his defense back there and the way he'd organise. He'll just need to learn a little bit about, the movements in the backfield, because they'll be very different to anything he would have experienced at league. And then I'm not sure what the last question was, but whatever it is, you'll be good at it, that's for sure.
Do you think you have to play more of a second ball player than at 12 if you've got a guy like him who's like the athlete? So I've spoke a little bit on the pod about how we've moved to a little bit of a Kiwi model, I reckon, now with our 2 ball running centres and maybe the 15s, your second playmaker. If you've got Joseph Suaalii at fullback, are you starting now looking at a guy who can play make a little bit more at 12?
Yeah, I think, Matt, it depends on. I'm not going to say it because you're here. A player like yourself who can play ball but can also carry well. Yeah, I think it can't just be an out. Even a guy like Kirtley, we played there a little bit, who can threaten the line himself but also be a distributor. And I think that they've got players like, say, a Hunter Paisami, who's a very good ball carrying player. I don't necessarily think you need to change him, but he is in like, we need a ball playing player. He can learn how to ball play, right? Then playing the elite level of the game, he's just got to understand how when he needs to, and picking the times. But I do think that person who can threaten the line and also ball play to then open up the threats for a player like Joseph, if he's playing wherever he's playing, fullback or centre, wherever it is, you open up those options a bit more. And even if you look at when Giddo played there, he's still a running threat, so it doesn't have to be the big ball carrying player who then has to convert. It can be a running threat with pace who can see a hole and take it, or but just that double threat where you could run or distribute with accuracy to be able to bring that player in line. Because like we were saying before, defenses are so improved now. You've really got to open them up by creating that little bit of deception or threat in different parts of the field.
But it's funny, Check, because about an hour ago, Matt said, "Hey, mate, we'll make this one quick because I've got people over and the smoker to prepare and the rest of it." We've taken up 40 minutes of your time. Thanks so much for jumping on the Raw Rugby podcast. It's so good to see you, and good luck at the Tigers. And I'm sure Matt will be saying the same, having played for that great club too.
Thanks, gents. Appreciate it.
So good to have Michael Cheika give us a fair bit of his time yesterday. So we had to record that one just a bit early because of his commitments with Leicester. But very generous and a character, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's so he knows he spins a lot of plates, doesn't he? He like I've seen so many sides to him: the motivator, the disciplinarian, the guy who gives you a cuddle, and then we speak to him at depth there about long-term planning and the shape of the game. And it's a man who's very, very well accomplished. You can see why he's been so successful and what he's done, and a very principled man as well. So, oh God, what a good get, mate. Very, very well done on getting him on the pod. I'm sure it'll do wonders.
Oh, I hope so. Anyway, yeah, I hope the punters, you enjoyed it. Let us know. Please reach out what you think about that one, and just a guess in general what you're interested in hearing about. Last one I check. Where does he rank in terms of the tactical kind of man? Because we all know that he's a great motivator. We've seen it. We've seen the clips that we spoke about last week in San Juan in Argentina, but tactically, at times, people thought he might have been found out a little bit towards the back end of his Wallabies tenure, deciding to do away with kicking a little bit to go his own way. Where do you think he's at in terms of a tactical acumen?
Yeah, I'd say in terms of a motivator, there's none better, and he values that part of the game, and tactically he's good as well. He enjoys he's Ranwick. He has that innovative style, but also a kind of a core belief and principle of running rugby and ball in hand rugby. Unfortunately, the way the game works and the way the cycles work, that can't always be rewarded. There's times when, yep, sure, it's great. 2015, really good time. Teams weren't rewarding a whole lot of the defensive team as much, and you start seeing some trends happen in that sense. So, he would obviously he'd let his attack coaches and whatnot take over, but every now and then he'd step in and he would little bit of a mic drop. I'll never forget, we played Argentina on the Gold Coast, and he had this one move that he was convinced would work, and we all kind of rolled our eyes, and we scored. Dane Haley scores a try in the corner off it, and he very much just mic dropped and was like, I should just fire all the attack coaches and do it myself. He's he's one. He's not going to blow his own trumpet, is he, with that kind of stuff? But I think everyone has their strengths. He understands the attacking side of the game for sure. But I think there's no better man motivator that I've ever come across.
Interesting. Well, anyway, it was great to have him on. The ABs and the box, geez, you were watching it, so I'm not sure how much you remember at 3 a.m. in the morning, but that was in the bag there for it, wasn't it? And they were up by 10 points or so, heading into that last 15 minutes. 2 quick tries, 2 converted tries. Quagga Smith, blimey, he's a good player. Can play anywhere on the back row in the centres. So effective. Grant Williams with the match winner. What did you make of it? There was a fair bit of controversy as well. The Bongi Mbambi try, the Cody Taylor try, the Rolling Moors. There's always controversy there. But even Sam Cane probably fortunate to not be shown a card, I'd say, given how well policed, generally speaking, high head contact is. And that was a shot on Sia Khaleesi that could see him miss quite a few games now.
Yeah, and dare say would add some PTSD from the World Cup final as well. Poor old Sam Cane. But look, the game was it was, like I said, it was really, really interesting. I found it. It wasn't scrappy. It was intense as anything. But it wasn't, like I said, your typical, say, Six Nations predictable shape kick. It was very much playing on momentum, very much playing off quick ball. Most kicks were contestable kicks, so you get a lot of bobbled ball. It was really interesting. Like I said, I was watching it and I couldn't put my finger on it. I was like, there's a few changes here. There's a few. It's not the kind of boring high intensity test match that you might tend to expect. I think 2 teams who were well and truly trying to change things up a little bit. I enjoyed it. I definitely thought the Box were quite fortunate to get away with that. I thought the ABs were on very much so. I thought that it was kind of their game. They had a point to prove.
Tell us what your thoughts are of Sasha Feinberg. Menguzolo, unbelievable his progression into the test arena. But when you're not starting a Andre Pollard, it does seem like there's a bit of I don't know if there's a complete changing of the card, but it does look like Rassie Erasmus is starting to usher through some of the next generations so that they are totally well equipped in a few years' time to try to go for a 3-peat. But it's been a stunning start for the young 10.
Yeah, it has, and it's exactly that. I think Rassi will be looking at the age profile. He'll be looking at being the first ever coach to potentially win 3 in a row World Cup wise, and he understands that in order to do that, you have to have a vast majority of your team at 40, 50 tests. But what a position to be in, say, for the Springboks to have a guy like Andre Pollard, looking over your shoulder. Comparatively, last year we had 2 guys essentially on their debut season at 10, with no real support. So he can afford to do that. He has the luxury of having the bomb squad there who can kind of fix anything that goes wrong. But it also allows a guy like him to have a little bit of pressure. Like there's a little bit of stress there that allows him to, he's got to perform every week. Otherwise he will be dropped. But yeah, it's an enviable position to be in. And you've seen a few changes in the pack as well. I think this year will be less so. I think next year will be quite interesting in terms of his squad rotation. I feel like this year they'll still be at the peak of their powers, as I've said before. But I think next year will be the one that will be a bit more challenging.
Well, a trip to New Zealand next year. South Africa will be going there. There'll be other testing kind of arenas for them ahead of them. Changing from the international arena to the club rugby scene, and finals played all over the place. I was at Leichhardt Oval and witnessed East just hang on 36-35 over Northern Suburbs, a grouping final there. Congratulations to your former side. Brothers with a late win over West. That was a gripping match too. And James O'Connor, friend of the pod, friend of yours, 29-27. He lands a late penalty. And down in your way, Canberra, too good for Tuggeranong as well. So awesome to see so many professional players, so many Wallabies Super Rugby players playing club rugby. That's what we need to be seeing, given the strength of the club rugby, but also what we need, the feel and the flavour across the country to be with rugby again, really trying to get everyone pushing in the right direction, the one direction.
Yeah, definitely the one direction. Yeah, look, and Check was talking about it earlier in terms of, having those players at a Super Rugby level that you look up to and inspire, but at a club level, like the impact of having a Super Rugby player playing for Canberra Vikings or for Brothers, and the young fellas in Colts looking up to that, like it's not necessarily appealing to the broader masses, but within the rugby community, that's super motivational. And I think that's really, really important. And seeing how professionals operate, seeing how they prepare themselves, the mentality they bring to these games, the respect that they give the games, these club rugby games, I think it's important. So, yeah, I think there's benefits, manifold.
I was up in Brisbane last month ahead of that Wallabies Springboks first TRC game, and I was at a function for a short while and ran into Henry Spate, and shout out to Henry. Unfortunately, he didn't get the chocolates on the weekend, but he said he was a listener of the pod and said he really paid some tribute to you, saying you were one of the smartest blokes in rugby.
Yeah, that's like saying that's not hard, put it that way. Yeah, I can spell my name correctly, so that puts me in the top few percent. But no, it's good to see Henry Silky, as we call him. He's got a few salt and pepper hairs now, which is always weird seeing guys like that playing and progressing the way they have. And it's really cool seeing him and James O'Connor, who they're not at the peak of their careers by any stretch of the imagination, but they're still enjoying their rugby, and the impact that they'd be having on local players, on club players, it's huge. It's massive. I'm not that kind of person because I get annoyed if I can't do something that I used to be able to do, so I prefer to just quit. But it's good that there's some good people out there still flying the flag.
Well, good on James. And I know that he was doing a fair bit of the coaching of that Brothers first 15 side. So congratulations. And indeed, congratulations to everyone that took part in some really memorable, exciting grouping finals over the weekend. Look, Awesome to have Check on the pod earlier. Great to have your company. The second match on this 2-test tour of Argentina coming up. And, of course, the All Blacks, can they bounce back in Cape Town? That'll be another intriguing contest. Razor Robinson, geez, that honeymoon is over for him. He's totally in the thick of it right now. I'll let you get back to teething and the bub. But, look, good pod. Thanks, Matt.
Good pod. Thanks, mate. Enjoying it. And, genuine ripper 2 games up this weekend. I could be anyone who could win, I reckon. So, wouldn't even bother trying to guess. So, can't wait.